Hey, I'm Alex,
And I'm Brandon.
and welcome to Living Electric.
We're both content creators and electric vehicle enthusiasts.
And through this podcast, we hope to share our experience with owning electric vehicles and help you join the electric life. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 4. We are finally tackling EV road trips on this episode. We've been hyping it a lot in our previous episodes, and it's kind of I guess you probably wouldn't call it taboo, but it's definitely like probably the biggest downfall of EVs right now is the charging times on road trips. But we're going to kind of share our experience on road trips today and talk to you guys about what it's actually like driving an EV on a road trip if you haven't experienced it before. So we're going to dive into a lot of different topics. I think charging stations, like how you find them, how do you plan routes, both just kind of share our experience on it. So Brandon, what's like your recent experiences with road trips? You probably haven't taken a lot this year, I'm guessing.
No, I have not. I mean, I've been fortunate to take some, just not recently. I last summer when we were driving between different racetracks, so to kind of set the background, my husband races a lot of different vehicles throughout the summer. We definitely do a lot of traveling between different racetracks, and this past summer I probably drove more than 2,000 miles to
Nice.
different tracks, driving an electric. The furthest one was a 1,000 plus mile round trip race
Wow.
trip to NCM Motorsports in Bowling Green, Kentucky. It's
Okay.
by the Corvette factory.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So all in all, it was about like a 10-hour trip with charging including.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was easy. I mean, there was Electrify America stations that took us all the way down there, Columbus, Cincinnati. We stopped in oh man, I think it was Louisville, and then down to Bowling Green, where there's a
Okay.
station right by the racetrack.
Gotcha. So if you plug in like on Google Maps, what would that trip be like without charging stops?
It was about seven and a half
7.
hours.
Okay.
Yeah,
So added
yeah,
like 3 hours to the trip, but also that's like a 7-hour trip. So that's
yeah.
kind of the thing. I think with shorter road trips, it's not as big a deal because you're maybe adding like 10 to 20 minutes to your road trip. But for the longer trips, it definitely can add up.
Hmm.
But then also like it's already a long trip. So I think
Yeah.
having those stops kind of built in actually like makes the trip a lot more enjoyable. I know I've heard that from a lot of EV owners that take long road trips. It's like usually I need to stop before the car does because like I'm getting tired on the road trip.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, I was about to say that it was nice kind of breaking it up because each
yeah.
station was about 2 hours apart from each other. So
Oh,
by then
perfect.
I'm hungry, got to get
Yeah,
out, stretch. It was
exactly.
kind of nice getting that break.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what people don't really realize when they are looking at EV road trips is they'll plug in like a destination on their map app or whatever they use, and they'll see, oh, it's a 6-hour drive. But I mean, when you're actually doing the road trip, I don't think people really realize like how much time they actually spend on stops. I think
Yeah.
that like you start paying attention to it more when you drive an EV because you're like, oh, like these stops are built in. I have to stop for 20 minutes. Whereas in a gas car, you can kind of push through that. But I think the times are actually a lot closer than people think when you build in those stops. Because I know when
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
would stop on long road trips as a kid, like we were stopping for probably 20 minutes if we stopped to get something to eat or something like that.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's not as long as you think.
No, no, and I think honestly, the nice thing about it is that like when you do have to stop somewhere that you may not be familiar with, is that you can like explore new areas, while your
Oh,
car is
definitely.
charging, find new
Yeah, that's a good point.
restaurants. I know for me, whenever I plan out like a trip, I always try to find like a local restaurant or like a cafe to support while I'm
Yeah,
charging my vehicle.
yeah, I love doing
Um,
that too.
yeah, and then I always try to promote them in some way too.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I wonder if I would love to see in the future we have like instead of rest stops, we have like charging stops with like a bunch of local food and stuff, like with fast chargers outside of them. Cause
Yeah,
like that's like the perfect amount of time. If you can grab like a quick meal in under 30 minutes, your car's charged up, you're good to go.
yeah. 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 I know in the UK they have that. They just opened a new location called GridServe.
Really?
Yeah, there's over, I think, 40 charging stations, and it's all powered by solar panels. And they have a
Wow.
local
Okay.
cafe. They have a gym in there. They have like a shop in there. You can buy cars there. Like,
Really? That's
yeah.
really cool.
So maybe here in the US we'll see that eventually.
Yeah, we need something like that, man.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Alex? What are summer trips you've been on?
So my two main ones that I've taken with my car, I honestly have not done a lot of traveling, and I want to do more because I have like the ability to do so, and charging is so cheap. I don't think we have that plan to talk about, but I think that's a good thing to bring up as well. Is
Mhm.
uh, the cost of charging compared to gas is so much lower. Like doing a road trip in an EV is so much cheaper than what you would probably spend on gas. It's pretty incredible.
Oh yeah.
Um, but my major trips, I have my parents over in Indianapolis, so I go over, drive over there to visit them a decent amount. And there is a charging stop. There's actually two now. There originally was only one, but now there are two superchargers along the way. When I first drove over there, it was like a couple days after I got my car. Actually, it was pretty interesting. I got my car on a Wednesday, and I drove over there on that Friday. so
Oh wow.
so that was like my kind of was thrown into road tripping, I guess. It's about a 200-mile drive. My car has rated about 300 miles. So I figured, oh, I'll just charge up to 100% and just drive straight over there. So I did that, and it was in November and it was getting very cold. So I drove.
I was just about to ask.
Yeah, it was very cold out. I was driving to see my brother's football game. It was their it was one of their first games of the season and for high school football. So I was driving over to see him. So we were kind of on a time crunch, which is why I charged up to 100% because I'm like, we'll just drive straight there. So charged up to 100% the night before, actually, because I don't have home charging. So I was at work, charged up to 100% at work, drove home. And then on Friday, we drove straight to Indianapolis and arrived with about 50 miles of range remaining, which was
Wow.
like pretty good given like the
Yeah.
cold temperatures.
Yeah.
But when I arrived, the car said plug in immediately. Colder temperatures could result in like not being able to drive your car. This is we drove straight to the high school too. We didn't even stop at home or like there's a plug to plug in. So we stopped at the high school. I was like, well, I mean, we don't really have a choice. So I'm just gonna leave my car here. It's only a couple hours. I think it'll be okay. So luckily it was. We stopped, watched the game. It was all good. Pretty sure they won too, so that was good.
Oh, nice.
Um, and then we drove home from there and was able to plug in at my parents' house. And I think that's kind of another part of road tripping is I think charging at your destination is just as important as charging along your routes.
Absolutely.
Because my parents don't have a charger in their garage. We just have regular wall outlets. So, which is fine because I usually, when I'm there, I'm not like driving around a ton. I'm trying to spend time with them. So I plug in just in our garage on the regular wall outlet. It usually adds like 40 to 50 miles overnight, which is usually plenty if we do any driving.
Yeah.
Um, and then we'll charge up basically the whole time we're there, keep it plugged in, and head back home. What I've realized is the trip is much more enjoyable if I take a stop halfway through. It's much easier. It's about a 3-hour drive if you just drive straight through, and I don't really like. I think that's about the limit for me is driving 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoy stopping halfway through. There used to be only a single supercharger along the way, just north of Dayton, and that was a version 2 supercharger. So there's version 2 and version 3 that Tesla just came out with. They just added a V3 supercharger along that route just over the border in Indiana. So
Oh, perfect.
it's actually much faster to just leave with whatever charge I have, as long as I've got enough to get to that first supercharger. And
Yeah.
then that charging stop takes about like 10 minutes. Like it's super fast.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's incredible. So what we do now is we'll leave Columbus. I usually need about 50 to 60% to get to the V3 supercharger. So we'll charge up to whatever we need to, drive over there, stop at the V3 supercharger. I plug in. I usually have to go to the bathroom anyway. So I go into it's at a Meyer parking lot. So I stop there. go to the bathroom. By the time I get back to my car, it's usually ready to go, which is
That's
insane.
that's crazy.
So so we've been doing that. It's a lot more enjoyable. I usually need to stop to use the bathroom or grab my tea. There's like a Subway pretty close there. So it's been much nicer now that we've added those charging stops in.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say that's one thing I've never really had a complaint about is stopping to charge. I always look at it as like a chance to take a break.
Oh yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I know for me before I started driving electric, my driving endurance was not nearly as high as it is now. I could probably drive like 2.5 hours and like need to stop.
Wow.
Yeah, but now, like I said, I did that 10-hour trip in one day, and besides my
Wow.
back hurting, I was totally good. Yeah. Do you feel like with the expansion of the version 3 superchargers, do you think that that's just going to make road tripping just easier for people?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely help. The thing is too, it's interesting with fast charging. Try not to get too technical, but basically the charging is much faster from like 5% to 20% than it is
Mhm,
to from like 20% to 90%. Right. So it's actually better to arrive at chargers with a lower percentage.
mhm.
So the reason we were able to take like much faster charging stops at that Richmond supercharger is because we arrive with like between 5 and 10% on our battery.
Okay.
So we usually leave with like 60, arrive there at like 5 to 10%, and it charges from that 5 or 10% up to like 40 in like 10 minutes, which is insane.
That's so
So
crazy. That's
um,
crazy. Coming from a Bolt owner,
yeah,
that's unbelievable.
yeah. So it's crazy fast. So I think that'll definitely help. But I think people need to understand with charging stops is it's better to arrive with lower states of charge.
Mhm.
Like you get into those like 30 or 40 minute fast charging stops, at least with a Tesla, when you're arriving to the supercharger with like 50%. It's like at that point, like it's probably better to just keep driving till you get
Yeah.
to another supercharger, depending on what route you're taking. So
Yeah.
that's at least been my experience.
Do you have you ever had like a bad experience like at a supercharger? Like,
So actually, we um, before that V3 supercharger was installed, we stopped at the Dayton supercharger. We were driving over to Indianapolis one time, and the supercharger was full. There's only 8 stalls there. 4 of them were not working because there was a recent power outage, and I
oh,
guess like some transformer got tripped off, and only 4 of the superchargers were up, and there were probably like 2 or 3 people waiting to charge. So
wow.
we decided to just keep driving, and we drove for a little bit. It was also very cold and very windy, which is not conducive for electric car driving. so so we got into Indianapolis, or we got into Indiana. We ended up stopping probably like 20 or 30 miles outside of Indy. Luckily, there was a local electricity co-op that had a free charger.
Oh,
So we
perfect.
stopped at that one. We had to stop for probably like 30 or 40 minutes to charge up enough to even get into Indianapolis to get to a supercharger. So we stopped there. Luckily, there was a Steak and Shake. I love Steak and Shake, so I got
Yeah,
some,
I do too.
got a burger and a shake there, which was fine. We obviously didn't want to take that stop, but it was necessary given the trip we were on. So
Mhm.
ended up arriving to Indianapolis a little bit later than we would have liked to. That's probably been the only like bad experience I had, and I think that's also something that could cause issues is chargers being like out of service. I think that's usually the only time where it's like really can screw up your trip. Like like gas stations are relatively reliable and you can find them just about everywhere, whereas chargers are spread pretty thin right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the nice benefit, about a lot of electric charging stations or car charging stations is that they're connected to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, like with your Tesla and like the applications we use, it will show you like in real time their charging or their availability status. So, like we had a question from a listener who was talking about like the power outages in Texas and what it took to do like a road trip or even get out of the Texas area because there was no electricity to charge. I think before you go on a road trip, it's definitely always good to plan ahead and at least kind of give yourself some type of preparation. But if you can't, at least in some stations in real time will show you if they're available or not.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know for me, I'm always checking if
Yeah,
stations are open or not.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because you've had some experiences where the Electrify America is like just straight up not working or isn't on, right?
Yeah, most of the time it has to do with the design of the charge port of the bolt. GM didn't reinforce it enough, so like if the cable is too heavy, it weighs down and it doesn't do like the handshake between the car and the
Mm,
charger to initiate charging. So you almost have to like hold it up the entire time it's connecting, and then you can drop
oh,
it. Which some EA stations take a bit. I actually had an issue one time where I was in the Youngstown area, and I was at a charging station at a Sheets, and I was approached by people asking or really demanding for money because they said that their car was broken into, and the entire time I'm holding the charger, like, come on, connect, like I just want to get back in my car.
yeah,
But I mean, that's like a rare instance that would happen. I've never had anything like that happen to me ever again. And besides, like, it was in the daylight, there was people around. If I needed help, I'm sure I could have
yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that leads to another thing, that like if you are planning a road trip, you should at least have an idea of what's around the charger.
Hmm.
Like if it's in for safety reasons, like a well-lit area,
Yeah,
if there's a place for you to go and use the restroom, so you're not just sitting in your car, like you can be in a well-lit area,
definitely.
something like that. Kind of
Yeah, I
goes back
think
to the
planning
preparation.
is very important. What's like your planning process if you are going on a longer road trip?
So I always look at apps like PlugShare or ChargeWay, especially ChargeWay since they have the route planning feature.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm always, putting a different like address just to see what kind of charging stations, if I need a membership for that charger, what kind of like restaurants or places for me to like kind of take a break are around there, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I typically take like a few days before I go on a road trip. I'm always like, my dream road trip is to drive across the country, so I'm
Hmm.
always figuring out routes, things to entertain me along the
Yeah.
way. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, it's so much different with like non-Tesla EVs because like the
Mhm.
supercharger network is like pretty built out. It's very easy to use, and unless you're going to like rural areas, like you can pretty much just use that network.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I do. I use a better route planner probably the most because there's a lot of different things you can choose in there, about like how much cargo you have, like the weight of it, like how many
Right.
passengers you have, what's your leaving state of charge, what state of charge do you want to arrive with. Like it's very, for
Wow.
like a data and like engineering nerd like me, it's good having all those numbers to mess with.
Yeah. I
But
feel like
also
I would
like,
like that.
yeah, it's pretty neat. But the thing is, like, you can plan as much as you want, like, until you actually go out there and like take the trip. It's hard to know exactly what to expect.
Exactly.
And I guess I don't want to speak for like everybody, but I think a lot of people take like pretty similar road trips every year, unless you're like a straight up, like you are a road tripper and constantly going like random places across the country. Like your road trips are pretty consistent. You're driving to like a state away to see family or another state away to see friends. Like it's kind of like you're kind of used to like the trips you take.
Yeah.
Um, so I think once you kind of have taken a trip once and have experience with the charging, like it's much easier after that. Like case in point with my like trips to Indianapolis, like that's a trip I don't even like plan anymore. I just like get in the car and drive. So
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like once you become comfortable with it, you can just go.
exactly. Yeah.
Now, Alex, do you have a dream road trip that like you've always wanted to take your Tesla on?
I would love to drive out west and go to like all the national parks out there. I think that would be so much fun. I don't know if it would be best to in my Model 3 though, because it doesn't have like a ton of space in it. Like I
No.
think it would be awesome to like have like a Cybertruck and like camp in it and then also be
Yeah.
driving it the whole time. I think that'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Yeah, I've been checking like almost daily to see how the network has been expanding. I would love to drive to Alaska. and
Wow.
like go all the way out to like California, then just go like straight up through Canada to Alaska.
Are there any
And
routes that way right now?
yeah, there is. And they're putting fast chargers up. I forget which province it is, like right by Alaska.
Yeah, I'm not
I think
sure.
it's British Columbia. I might be wrong.
I think that's on the
um,
other side,
is
actually.
it
I
about
think British Columbia
probably
is on the east
it,
side.
it probably is. But there's like they're putting in like the stations that you would like find at like a Chevy dealership that like charges your car to like 25 kilowatts to 50 kilowatts.
Oh, okay.
But there's a gap between the one fast charger and then the first fast charger in Alaska. And
Okay.
it's probably like a 200 to 300 mile gap right now.
Yeah.
So close. But that's a dream of mine is whenever I pick up my Cybertruck is to camp in it, like you said, and just drive all
Definitely.
the way to Alaska.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just looked it up. British Columbia is on the west side. You were right. I was
Oh,
wrong.
I know my geography. That's a
Yeah.
first.
I do not know Canada very well. I don't know all the provinces. So
Yeah. Well, that I'm just proud of myself for knowing that. Well, that sounds like that could be a fun road trip. Maybe if we both get Cybertrucks, we can do
there you
that
go.
together.
Yeah. Our
Could be
own
a fun
version
YouTube
of
video.
what was that TV show, The Long Way Up, where they like take a Rivian and
Oh,
like a zero motorcycle and like road trip with it.
actually, it was a Harley. It was
Was it a Harley? Okay.
the live wire
Gotcha.
from the bottom of South America all the way to Los Angeles. I think it was like a 13,000 mile trip.
Jeez.
Yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I haven't
Do
watched
our
that
own
yet, but
version of
I
that.
yeah, that'd be cool. I could go for a Rivian.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, Alex, out of like the road trips that you've taken so far, what are some of your favorite things about it?
My favorite things about it, I think the fact that I'm not filling up with gas the whole time.
Yeah.
Like I very much dislike stopping at gas stations. I think I've realized that like now owning an EV and like the few times I've had to pump gas since owning an EV is just how like I don't like it.
Yeah.
Like plugging in is so much easier for me. And I do like taking those extra stops. So I think that's probably my favorite part is like the tech aspect of like, all right, I gotta charge up my car. Like that sounds really cool.
Right.
Versus like filling up my tank.
Yeah.
But honestly, like I have this weird like guilt too when I like drive a gas car that I'm literally like pumping CO2 directly into the atmosphere, like even just like the local atmosphere.
Mhm.
So like driving an EV, like kind of that peace of mind that I'm not like constantly polluting the areas around me is pretty cool too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of always get this feeling when I'm driving, like, oh, I'm not polluting.
Yeah,
It's kind of a nice feeling.
it really is. Yeah. I don't feel as guilty, but also like on the practical side, I do enjoy taking those stops. Like I feel like previously on road trips, I would constantly be like waiting to stop because but I wouldn't stop because like I didn't need to fill up my tank. Now like
Yeah,
I do need to charge my battery, so like I have kind of an excuse to stop.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think about that from time to time, like all the road trips I've been on, especially like when I was younger, like how many cool things did I miss because we just stopped for 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, like how many things like places I could have explored or people
Hmm.
I could have met. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
That's a good point.
yeah. You actually did bring up a good point about not stopping at gas stations. The most of the stations I've stopped at are at gas
Really?
stations. Yeah,
That's
actually,
funny.
come to think of it, most of the EA stations going to like West Virginia are at Sheets.
Okay.
Actually,
It's a nice
all of
gas
them.
station though.
Yeah,
I've heard
yeah, at least
good
it's a
things
nice
about
one.
Sheets.
Yeah, yeah, and they have vegan hamburgers I can get while I'm
There you go.
charging.
Yeah, the other thing I really like is Autopilot. I don't think we've even really brought that up on this podcast yet, but driving on Autopilot on a road trip is like a dream. Like
Hmm.
road trips used to be so stressful for a lot of different reasons because you're constantly like worried about people hitting you and like just trying to rush to get to your destination. But like the fact that I can relax so much more in the car is so nice. Like I can put
Yeah,
it on autopilot, set my speed. I've got enhanced autopilot now too, so like it can do lane changes for me,
yeah,
which is amazing.
that's
So
awesome.
I basically set that on, and I'm good to go for hours, honestly. Like there's very few times that I actually have to take it off autopilot. And it's usually when I'm taking a stop or like taking an exit. That's like the few times I do have to take it off.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I have not used except for when I was riding with you that one time, the auto lane change.
It's
I
insane.
I have a lot of experience with like the first generation autopilot. And
Mhm.
even then when it was just like a single, camera portion of like the
Yeah.
windshield, it was
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's come a long way. It was funny when I was home, actually, I always have to drive on the first road I ever used autopilot on. So it's funny when I go home to Indianapolis, I always have to drive on the first road I ever used autopilot on to get home. Like that's the route I take. Um, and I remember when I first used autopilot, one of my dad's work friends had like picked up a used Model S and he brought it over like for us to check out. He's like, "Do you want to drive it?" And I'm like, "Yes." This was in like 2015, I think. So like
Okay.
4 years before I got my car.
Yeah.
And got to drive it. He's like, "Okay, put it on autopilot." So I like clicked it on, and I remember it being very good when the lanes were okay. But then as
Yeah.
soon as a turn lane came up, like a little like side turn lane, it immediately like veered into that turn lane and it didn't like stay driving straight. But now I put autopilot on that same road driving home, and it is like smooth as butter. Like, like it's improved so much. It's crazy, like that it's gotten
That's
that
great.
good in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's almost like a tradition for you now. Like you
Exactly.
used
Yeah,
autopilot for the first time and now you got to use it every time.
it's pretty crazy.
That's great. Yeah, I remember the first time I used autopilot the correct way. I think we could do a whole episode on autopilot because I have a funny story about using it the first time. But I was on a business trip coming back from northern Michigan, and it was snowing, and a lot of the lanes were kind of blocked, and the car still did really well. And that
Wow.
was back in 2016.
Wow.
So I can imagine it's just gotten better.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's like one of the reasons I wanted to get that car was the charging infrastructure is huge. Like I think that's definitely an understated part of driving an EV. Like there's definitely nothing wrong with going a non-Tesla EV, especially as the networks have gotten so good. But like
Mhm.
even just a year ago, like I was looking at like how easy the supercharger network is to use, and then plus the autopilot, like it was pretty much a no-brainer to go with a Tesla.
I have been curious about GM Super Cruise. I know that
Yeah,
you can really only use it on I think like what 200,000 plus miles of like regulated highways.
that is a
Um,
heated debate right now between
yeah.
Tesla owners and GM. It's kind of
uh,
funny.
yes, I have seen it on Twitter.
I don't know
I
if you
have.
saw, but Doug DeMuro just came out with a video where he's like, GM Super Cruise is way better than Autopilot. I haven't watched it yet, but like just the response from Tesla owners has been kind of funny because people get
Oh yeah,
triggered so
yeah,
easily if like people say Autopilot isn't the
yeah.
best thing ever.
Well, we were so like GM just announced the Bolt EUV and how that's
Mhm.
going to be like the first Chevy product with Super Cruise. We were looking at the map and we love Key West. Like we want to go back to Key West, but we love to drive down there. And the highway from Miami to Key West is not even part of Super Cruise at
Really?
all, and it's like literally a two-lane highway, and most of the time you're on bridges, and so I don't know. I don't really understand why. I'm sure that like the map will expand, but I'm not exactly sure why
Yeah.
they did that.
Yeah, we'll
um
see. It looks interesting.
yeah, it does. I would love to experience it, but from what I've used with autopilot I can tell that's a better system
Yeah.
for now at least.
So another thing to keep in mind when you are on road trips is at least with a Tesla, it's pretty easy. Like you can use superchargers almost exclusively, but there are other options out there for fast charging. I know with my car, I don't even have one, but you can buy a CHAdeMO to Tesla adapter. So you can use
Mhm.
CHAdeMO stations. Um, so that is another option if you are going to more rural areas. I know some people will have that charger adapter with them so that they have more options when it comes to charging. And there's not an official CCS adapter for Tesla yet, but I know you can buy one and get it imported. But I don't think it's like official Tesla yet, but I hope there's one coming.
Well, I do know Tesla does have an official CCS. Actually, one of our listeners informed us of that. I think after our first episode.
Oh, it's
It
like, but it's not sold in the US. It's only in
Not
like,
yet. Yeah, it's South Korea and Europe right now.
okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it will make its way over here. I know a lot of
Yeah.
Tesla drivers want it.
Yeah, so it's interesting over in Europe because they passed some law that required all EVs to have the same charging port. So they pretty
Mhm.
much adopted the CCS plug as their official charging port. So like any European Teslas have the CCS port and a Tesla port, I think. I think they have both.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which is pretty nice. So I definitely like to see us move that direction in the US. But the other thing is non-Tesla EVs in the US cannot use supercharging stations,
No.
which kind of like eliminates a lot of charging options for you, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like there are adapters that go from like the Tesla port or plug to the J1772 or like the standard EV plug,
Mhm.
but cannot use supercharging.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I could use Tesla destination chargers if I had that adapter.
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your options are just CCS. Do you even have, is there a way to do CHAdeMO on the Bolt?
Uh, I'm sure there's an adapter out there, but I don't know of it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I would prefer to use CCS to be honest, because most of the stations I go to, there's only one CHAdeMO adapter or plug,
Oh, okay.
and that's only because by law those locations have to have at least one. I know for me, I definitely agree with you. I wish that there was some type of standardization regarding like plugs, at least here in America. But I think Tesla is too far down the road where I think without an adapter, I don't think it's going to happen. Just
Yeah,
because like they've already produced so many vehicles with their standard.
I
But
know.
the nice thing is that there are adapters.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens with all that. I think the CCS, I think we'll get to a point where like the chargers will have both options. I know like a lot of charging stations are like, all right, we have a Tesla adapter and we have
Mhm.
a CCS adapter and we have a CHAdeMO adapter. Like they're just almost like at a fuel pump where you've got like different handles
Ex-
for the different
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
different types of gas you need. Like it'll be similar to that.
Yeah.
And even Electrify America, I think, said that they're going to start adding, or no, was it EVgo? I think it's EVgo
EVgo. Yeah.
that just said they're going to start adding Tesla plugs on their charging stations, which is awesome. So then you
Yeah.
don't need an adapter.
Yeah. Yeah. That's going to make it much easier for Tesla
Oh my
drivers to use
gosh,
their
yeah. Like
stations.
that's the one thing that has like kept me away from using non-Tesla stations is like I need an adapter and it usually costs a few $100 at least to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth it when there's so many
Yeah.
superchargers. So I'll definitely
Have you
start looking at other stations.
Oh yeah, yeah. Have you used the CHAdeMO adapter? Like, have you seen one before?
Yeah,
There.
Craig Hart, you know him. He was
Yeah.
at like an EV event, and he was charging his car there on a CHAdeMO with it, and then I got to use it on my car because I was getting low on charge. But I mean, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's just like any other adapter. You just put it on and plug
Yeah.
it into your car.
Yeah.
It's just really expensive, and it's got to be so big because I think there's
It's
some
huge.
electrical stuff they have to do like on the inside that can't fit into a tiny little adapter.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure of it. Yeah, I've used one driving with a Model X up to Michigan at
Mm,
Nissan's. I don't think it's their headquarters, but they have like a design studio up there, and they have a fast charger right at the front. And so
okay.
I stole their CHAdeMO,
Yeah.
but that thing took up almost half of my trunk space.
Yeah.
It's not small.
It's not small. The other thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here, I touched on it a little bit, but the charging at your destination, I think that is like uber important on road trips. I think it kind of goes understated a lot. Another trip I did was actually to my college for like an alumni weekend. I went to school at Ohio Northern, which is like in the middle of nowhere. But fortunately, we've transitioned to a lot of like renewable stuff at ONU. That's part of the reason I actually went there. We've got 3 windmills that help power campus, and we just built like this giant solar field there
That's
to help
awesome.
power campus. It's really cool.
Wow.
And that was like part of the driving factor to get me to go there. they used to have only a single charging point on campus right behind the pharmacy building. They've since expanded to add 4 more chargers, and the hotel on campus also has a charger.
Oh,
So
perfect.
since they've added all those, I've like been able to go up there and charge my car while I'm up there, which is pretty cool. So anytime I travel up there, it's not a long trip. It's like it's probably about an hour now,
Mhm.
out or less, and I'm able to plug in at the hotel there, which is pretty cool. They've got like a charging spot out there with a spot for EVs. Can plug in there overnight and it's free. It's awesome. So I think that's another point to remember if you are planning a road trip with an EV is look
Mhm.
at like the places you go to, the places you normally stay, and make sure there's a place for you to charge.
Yeah. Yeah, that is actually a point that I wanted to bring up too. A lot of hotels are starting to install charging stations.
Yes,
I've
I'm
seen a
so
lot like
glad.
it. Yeah, yeah, it's nice. A lot of Marriott's, Hilton's. I know obviously luxury places like the Ritz have Tesla chargers. So it's definitely a nice perk to
Hmm.
have.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to bring up too, all those racetracks that I went to last summer had charging stations
That's
for me to
cool.
plug into.
Is that because they have a lot of people like racing or driving their EVs on the courses or
Correct. Yeah,
wow, that's
especially
cool.
like the Tesla performance vehicles.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of Clipper Creek level 2 chargers.
Okay.
There was one at Summit Point Motorsports Park in West Virginia that they had 12 charging stations. They had
Wow.
six Tesla stations and 6 Clipper Creeks.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really
So
cool.
it was kind of nice to wake up to a full charge.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
Do they have like gas pumps at those places
They,
too?
they do. And the funny thing is that most of the EV chargers are free, and obviously you have to pay for
Yeah,
gas. Yeah. Yeah.
that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
And
you
since
probably waste a ton of gas and electricity if you're like hammering it on the race course. So
yeah, yeah. And plus the gas is race spec fuel, so it's even more expensive.
interesting. Is that like
Yeah.
special chemically different than normal
It's
gas?
like I think so. I think it was like 100. I don't even remember. It's been so long since I pumped gas. I don't know what that's called. I almost said 100 proof. I know it's not alcohol.
Is it like octane or something?
Octane. Yeah,
Yeah.
something
Okay.
like that. Yeah, I don't even know.
Interesting.
Gas isn't part of my mindset.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to get away from, but then people talk about it, and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right? Yeah, yeah. No clue. So I noticed at the beginning of this episode that I got a little tripped up while I was speaking.
That's actually a good one.
Thank you. I try.
Because trips like electricity trips. I gotcha.
Oh, I was thinking like a road trip.
Well, that too. That's what I mean. It's like it's a double pun.
Yeah, exactly. Pat myself on the back for that one. So that's going to be it for today's episode of Living Electric. If you guys have any comments or questions, or if you have any ideas that you want to talk with us about, definitely let us know on social media, especially road trips. Let us know some road trips that you've been on. We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, definitely. Talk to you guys in the next episode.